From inclusive finance to sustainable economies, Africa is building its future. This is The Sound of Progress, a podcast by FSD Africa. This is Financing Africa's Future.
Today we are very pleased to be joined by Martin Freimüller, CEO and co-founder of Octavia Carbon, an organization that is doing really exciting and amazing stuff. What a pleasure to have you, Martin.
Thank you so much for welcoming me.
Maybe we could just get into it and you tell us, who is Octavia Carbon and what exactly do you guys do?
So we design, build and deploy machines that filter CO2 from the atmosphere to reverse climate change.
Wow, that sounds cool and amazing. Let's step back. So are you guys literally able to suck carbon out of the atmosphere?
Yes, we are. So it's a technology called direct air carbon capture, or DAC for short. And it has unique potential to help us get to net zero in the fight against climate change.
Wow, let's take it a bit slow. Direct air carbon capture. Would you break it down for us and tell us exactly how you guys are able to do that?
Of course. So the key thing to realize is that CO2 is a slightly acidic molecule. So if you have a strong base, you can put that into a filter, pass a lot of air through that filter, and then the filter will absorb the CO2. And then from there, essentially, you can use heat to release that CO2, isolate it, and then pump it underground where it can turn into rock and lock up that CO2 forever. And Kenya is a very unique place to do that.
Yeah, so once you suck the carbon out of the atmosphere, you're able to dump it on the ground, and you're saying it's able to convert it to rock. Again, a bit of detail about exactly the chemistry and the processes that make that possible.
Yes, no, we're very happy to. So essentially, in detail, how the process works is that once we have that CO2, we hand it to our storage partner who are called Sela Mineral Storage here in Kenya. And they would inject it something like 800 to 1,000 meters below ground, where essentially like that CO2 reacts with sort of highly porous rock, volcanic rock, that is very rich in sort of calcium and magnesium, and through that what you essentially form is a calcium carbonate, or carbonate minerals more broadly, and that is the most thermodynamically stable form of carbon. And even more excitingly, it is also an entirely natural process that happens all around us all the time, basically. So essentially CO2 reacts with moisture in the air, forms carbonic acid, reacts with like rocks like everywhere basically, and by doing so, the atmosphere has, over very long time horizons, the ability to regenerate itself, basically. The problem is that, like, as it happens in nature, it just takes a very, 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 very long time, thousands to millions of years. And essentially what we are able to do in Kenya's unique geology, because we have that very porous volcanic rock, we have a very high surface area to inject that CO2 into, and for that CO2 to then ultimately accelerate that reaction quite dramatically and turn into rock that way.
Wow, I mean, that sounds quite something, and I have many questions to ask. But even before then, I wonder, how did you even think about this idea?
No, it's a great question. So my background is in international development strategy consulting, and we were bouncing ideas around about what the sort of big new emerging industries would be that parts of the global south, like Kenya, could sort of benefit from. And again, having become familiar with the climate science at the time, I realized that we need to remove something like 5 to 10 billion tons per year of CO2 from the atmosphere and store it durably, underground preferably. And to give you a sense of scale, that's about like building twice the size of today's oil industry. And that's from virtually nothing in about 25 to 30 years. So that is, daunting, but it's also a huge opportunity for a country like Kenya to actually really benefit from this emerging industry by positioning itself and its unique resources in the fight to scale up that technology.
I mean, it's really fascinating, as you say, that you're able to suck carbon out of the atmosphere and you're able to durably put it on the ground. Your operation, what are we talking about in terms of capacity? How much CO2 are you able to pull out, and how long does that process take?
The answer is sadly quite disappointing. Like, for now, we are tiny, basically. So like a few tens of tons of CO2 per annum that we remove from the atmosphere, which really just goes to show that the technology is still quite early stage. And from here, we want to sort of scale up to the scale of around about 1,000 tons of CO2 removed from the atmosphere each year. Which is still going to be tiny. Again, we call it Project Hummingbird after, again, Wangari Maathai's famous story of the hummingbird, dropping drops of water on like a forest fire. And that's kind of what it means to remove 1,000 tons of CO2 from the atmosphere when we're emitting like tens of billions of tons per year. But the point is that from there you can scale to like much larger scale, and ideally the idea is to, again, soon by early 2030s to more than 1 million tons a year of CO2 removal from the atmosphere in Kenya, and then closer to mid-century like actually get to the billions of tons that we will need to meaningfully address climate change. Currently it takes around about like $500 per ton to like suck up 1 ton of CO2 from the atmosphere. And that's already within sort of like reach of like the current industrial CO2 prices or in a country like Kenya and elsewhere. Much as our focus, of course, is to like actually take that CO2 and put it underground. And in many ways, there's like different comparisons that you could have there. Like it's definitely true that as a carbon credit that costs many hundreds of dollars per ton, that could be seen as quite expensive as opposed to like say planting a tree, which might cost you something like $20 per ton that it removes from the atmosphere. The key difference, of course, is, and again, this is also why climate science is insisting on like durable carbon removal at the sort of like rate of more than 100 years of CO2 stored, is that it's very hard to say that tree, like the trees that we're looking at here, like trees outside this window here, will actually be there in say 100, let alone 1,000 years time, but our emissions will still be in the atmosphere. So that's essentially the category that direct air capture is today operating in, that of durable carbon removal. And while it is expensive today, the exciting thing is that it's coming down in cost very, very, very quickly. But yeah, it's hard work. CO2 is only 0.04% of the atmosphere for all the effects that it's having. So isolating it definitely like takes a lot of energy and some costs. But of course, it's what we quite like to say is that sort of thermodynamically, like capturing carbon from air is about as crazy as generating electricity from sunlight. Until you do. And you actually scale it, and then it actually turns out to be a lot less hard than you think. So.
Wow. I wanted to ask you, of course, you've mentioned the industrial uses of CO2. Any chance that some of the CO2 that you guys are collecting, you can sell it to them as opposed to pumping it back to the ground?
Absolutely. So like CO2 is a very widely used industrial gas. So, from the sort of like the bubbles into like a beer and like it's a welding gas. It's used in medicine for dry ice to transport medicines and so on. But the key thing is that like it's not necessarily our target to sell into the local market, partly because like the market for durable carbon removal is many orders of magnitude larger today already. Basically, we're talking of something like a ballpark like $10 million per year market for all of East Africa to produce industrial CO2, whereas the global market for durable carbon removal this year will be something in the ballpark of $10 billion per annum, basically, so 1,000-fold more. And of course, the exciting thing about carbon dioxide removal is that it doesn't matter where in the world you do it. And so in many ways, to use a sort of jargon term, it becomes the perfect arbitrage opportunity. You just want to do it where it's the lowest cost to actually do so, and Kenya is exactly that place.
Yes, you also mentioned carbon markets. I hope these are promising revenue stream for you to pay for the $500 it takes to suck a ton of carbon.
Absolutely. So we have already contracted $3 million worth of carbon credit purchases. So essentially those are purchases that we will deliver against in the sort of next decade after we commission our pilot plant next year. So from 2026 till 2035, thereabouts. And even more exciting than that, like half of that 3 million, so about $1.5 million, we've already been prepaid for as well. So our customers have sort of like given us that capital up front because number one, they trust us, but they also want to help us to like lower the cost of capital that we have building out these projects. So that's been a very good like validation of the market, and I think now we have something like 20 corporate partnerships of companies buying our carbon removal credits, and that is great validation for one.
Wow, I think that's quite encouraging to hear. You have all these partners and all these buyers that are queuing up, and hopefully that's going to give you sort of the capital that you need to scale up and grow up to the ambitious figures that you have. Of course, direct air carbon capture, sounds quite novel and quite new here in the global south, but maybe actually globally. How does the capacity look outside there? Any other countries that are doing this sort of thing?
In Iceland, again, which is the only other place that has an operational plant, they're doing somewhere like 1,000 to 2,000 tons a year of this carbon removal per year, actually. And they've had some track record in actually getting this to scale, and work is hard. So we have a lot of respect for those folks. There's other plants coming up, the US should soon commission their own plant that's led by the company Occidental Petroleum, or Oxy. They have a plant of about 250,000 tons per annum that they want to bring online either late this year or early next year. And again, there's definitely plants coming online in different places on Earth: Canada, Norway, the UK, etc. But it's fair to say that Kenya is a global frontrunner, and Octavia Carbon may well end up being the world's second ever company to issue that kind of carbon credit as well.
Wow, all the best with that. Yes, FSD Africa, of course, we support lots of early stage organizations that are doing important carbon climate work like yourselves. I don't know how hard or easy it was for you to raise the very initial carbon. Now, you're getting known by more and, signing in more partnerships. How was it early stage for you when at the start, the idea level, and you wanted to get going?
No, I think when we just got going, people just thought we were crazy. Because, and again, this is a sad truth, I think, that we have uncovered. And to put it quite bluntly, people or investors don't believe that Africans can build the future. And I think in many ways, we are really setting out to prove the exact opposite, especially when it comes to hardware manufacturing, producing globally competitive machines in a novel technological category. That is something that we are very fixated on proving. And doing so is hard. And I think, in many ways, it's to the immense credit of FSD Africa's Investee Catalyst Fund to be the first institutional investor to take a risk on us back in late 2022. And they've been fantastic partners to us ever since, as has FSD Africa. And it definitely takes more capital like that to take risks and actually to catalyze those real growth sectors that can actually catalyze world change, really game-changing economic growth for the African continent. I mean, to give you a sense of the scale of this, the world has to remove something like 10 billion tons per year by 2050. Kenya is the world's best place to do it. Say we do half of that, 5 billion tons a year. People often say that it's hard to say exactly what the price of that carbon removal will be by 2050, but for argument's sake, let's say it's about $100. $100 is often seen as a quite reasonable level where that price might end up.
Right.
That's 5 billion tons times $100 per ton. That's $500 billion. Divide that by 50 million Kenyan, that's $10,000 per Kenyan. That technology alone is enough to actually make Kenya into a high-income country, and exactly that is what we're targeting. But it needs the ambition, it needs to think the risk capital to actually say, hey, yes, doing things that are very new involve unique risks early on, basically. But when they actually then get to scale, and we're increasingly at that point, they are just unstoppable and a deep sort of defensible industry that a country like Kenya can massively benefit from. And again, in many ways, our to sort of round out this thought here, that our largest ambition really is to turn Kenya's renewable energy wealth into prosperity for its people, and direct air capture and essentially the negative emissions that we can export from Kenya can become a way of doing just that, basically. So again, much like other countries have benefited from their energy wealth, say the Gulf countries and other places, Kenya is actually a very rich country if you look at the energy endowments that we have. The goal now really is to turn into prosperity. That's what we're doing.
What do you think the ecosystem, the different players, governments, development actors can play towards enhancing more capital so that we can be able to scale and stop talking about pulling out maybe tens of thousands and go to the millions and the billions tons of CO2?
I think a big start will just be for government to continue the very sort of productive work that they have been doing to build out the sort of intergovernmental trade of carbon credits. Basically, there's plenty of governments that have, or countries that have, net zero targets, and essentially like they will have to import a good number of carbon removal to actually hit those targets. And Kenya has been very proactive in going out to actually like close carbon trade deals with the likes of Switzerland and Sweden. I think we're working on one with Singapore and now Japan as well. So those will be quite beneficial as sort of tailwinds for our model as well. I think beyond that, I think the availability of capital will be sort of like a key requirement, basically. So working capital for local manufacturing, and then essentially like R&D capital to like essentially like generate the latest insights that can then like make the technology even more competitive. And yeah, I think so like investments across the ecosystem, whether that's like the geothermal heat, or whether it's the storage, or of course the data capture side. Like I think all of those are really important to realize Kenya's full potential here. So I think that's like it will take investment on behalf of Kenya and its development partners, basically, but the payoff is absolutely there. And again, in many ways we just want to like show the road as a company on how that can actually be achieved, because again we already have like many of the world's largest companies actually buying credits from us, and that's a huge sort of point of pride, and we just want to like show that actually become an enormous industry for Kenya, even beyond what we already have in the voluntary carbon markets.
Wow. The last time I was at your plant, Martin, I saw it teeming with many young scientists. It looked like quite a busy place. How many has your organization employed?
And so we're a team of about 70 people today. And within that, we have about 45 engineers and scientists, basically. So and that's everything from like doing very deep R&D at lab scale to actually working on designing that into products and plants, basically, to actually building and running those plants in the fields. And yeah, I mean, to date, we definitely have a pretty proud track record of what that talent has achieved. We've built not one but two projects in less than 6 months each, on time and on budget, and we've now run those projects for more than 10,000 hours at the module level, and more than 5,000 hours at the level of the whole plant. So yeah, super proud of what our team has been achieving here in Kenya. Well
done. As we wrap it up, I can't help but ask, what's next for Octavia? Where do you see the organization 5, 10, 30 years from now?
No, that's also a really good question. So I think essentially we now need to show that we can actually remove CO2 at scale. So we need to build a larger plant. We need to actually certify those credits. We need to get a sort of proper carbon credit rating. We've already been rated the second ever AAA carbon credits in the world. But that's not yet been delivered, so we now have to deliver those credits and then do that rating again. And I think from there, I think we're in a really excellent position to really scale up dramatically with demand from global players from all around the world, and increasingly also Kenya's partner governments around the world. And so yeah, I think our goal really is that you'll be able to sort of come see our site about 10 or so years from now, and you'll sort of climb on a mountain that's there. It's called the Sleeping Warrior, and you'll just see a field of the world's latest direct air carbon capture technology, removing CO2 at a massive scale, and really just showing to the world that when it comes to climate innovation, that Kenya is at the very, very front of actually making it happen.
Well, Martin, thank you very much for passing by.
Thank you so much for having me.